But on that particular mission, I was flying a squadron lead of the low squadron of the high group, and there was one airplane they picked out to shoot down, and they did a good job, and they shot me full of holes. I had number 1 engine was feathered, number 2 engine was on fire, number 3 engine was running away. Had the hydraulics shot out, had the communications shot out, had a fire in the tail, and had a fire in the radio room. We pretty well realized that we weren't going to make it. Only about 1 out of 4 ever made it. And if you got over 10 missions, you were living on borrowed time. And everybody realized that. So you went out and you did the best job you could. Every day you tried to perform and get the mission accomplished with accuracy on the target, because targets were selected because of priority, and if you didn't get it that day, that means you have to go back the next day. I saw my first airplane. It was a Pitcairn autogyro in Carrollton, Ohio, and I realized then that that was someplace for me to have a goal to attain, to get into the air. And then at that time, which was all part of the now Experimental Aircraft Association, it was then they had the home builders, and they were building their airplanes in the garages, and no kits then. They were doing it all by hand. And I used to watch them make a wing and watch them make some fuselage. And there'd be a few of them around town that did that. And I sit there and watch them do it every time. Oh, I was 9 and 10 years old then, and enjoying every bit of it. I think it was beautiful. When I was there, I thought this was the most wonderful town in the world, and it's still a great town. It's like so many nice towns, it's too far north for an old man, so I had stay down south. But when I was a little child, I thought, well, when I grow up and I can, live where I want to live right here. It's that kind of a town. Well, it's a long story. I was sold newspapers on the corner in Steubenville, Ohio. I purchased newspapers for 2 cents, sold them for 3 cents, made a penny a piece. And if I sold 30 a day and did it 5 days a week, had $1.50, I could walk 4 miles to a little airport called Half Moon Airport in the Panhandle of West Virginia. I could get 15 minutes of dual time in an Aeronica C3, 38 horsepower, 2-cylinder. Take off, make a couple turns, go back and land. It was $6 an hour dual, so that was my 15 minutes. I'd walk 4 miles back home, and next week I'd start all over again. I was probably a junior in high school, so that put me in the 16, 17-year age category.
Is there anybody else in your crowd, in your class, that was that crazy about airplanes, that was doing what you were doing?
Nobody I was associated with, nobody I knew had anything to do with airplanes. It was just my original and fondest desire. I guess it's probably my feeling for adventure, feeling for something that was different, and it was all I was ever interested in. Well, the war started, when it started in Europe, that would have made me in the category 17 years of age. Well, the feeling in our hometown was much like it was every place else. They were isolationists. We have an ocean on each side of us, and we're protected by the ocean. And most people thought it would never come to pass. And of course, the politicians, including President Roosevelt, said that he would keep us out of the war, but that didn't work out, so as we all know. Well, it was on a Sunday, as everyone knows, and I was working in a service station with another young fellow, and I said, I don't know where Pearl Harbor is, but if the Japanese are jumping on us, they're making a big mistake. Which it took a little while for that to come to pass, but it ended up exactly that way. Well, the first thing I did, I went to Patterson Field at that time. They had a Fairfield Air Depot was there, and that's where they took care of all the damaged aircraft. And I worked on a P-39 that had bellied in on the grass field at Patterson Field, which of course now became part of the Wright-Patterson complex. And I worked there and took my cadet exams there, passed the cadet exams, and they told me to take my letter back to my draft board and let them know that I should be held in waiting till my cadet exam went through and I was assigned a class. So I went back and they turned that in to them, and they promptly drafted me. And they didn't pay attention to the letter I had. They drafted me. I ended up in the 305th Combat Engineers in the 80th Division in Camp Forest, Tullahoma, Tennessee. And I was there for some time until the orders came through transferring me to the Aviation Cadet Corps. And at that time, I was transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, where they had classification and made a determination if you were going to be a pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Well, the cadet program was a training for discipline. It was a training to be an officer. It gave some ground training, ground school in aeronautics and in engines and in weather and in radio communications. We all had to learn the Morse code until we could pass a certain amount of words per minute in Morse code. And mainly it was learning to be an officer. And after the completion of that, which was at Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama, completion of that, went to primary flight school, Decatur, Alabama, flying Stearman PT-17s. Well, I went into the Air Forces with the intent of trying to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to fly P-38s. I thought it was the most beautiful airplane in the world and very effective. However, I tried my very best and ended up in the top 10 of the class, and the top 10 went to B-17s. So that's what happened there. I graduated from flight school on July the 28th of 1943, and that was exactly 62 years ago yesterday. And I was given my orders to report to Sebring, Florida. I reported there on August the 4th of 1943. Married my high school sweetheart the same day, and started transition training in the B-17. In the left seat of a B-17, I had approximately 173 hours. I had a total of 520 hours of aircraft flight time when I went to combat. We really realized immediately that this is a war that had to be won. It had to be won as quickly as possible, and everyone wanted to get involved as quickly as we could. As a matter of fact, I wanted to fly a bomber to England. I didn't get a chance to. I went over to England on a boat, and then I flew back. But everyone was anxious to get the job done. Well, it really did. I had a more of a profound effect prior to that. When we went to Kearney, Nebraska, my wife Billy was with me, and I had to send her home. And when I looked over my shoulder and saw her for the last time, I knew that it could very well be for the last time. And that was very, very trying for me. Leaving Boston on the ship, the SS Brazil, was trying, but not as bad as it was when I left Billy. It took us 13 days. We were on the SS Brazil. It took us 13 days to get there because we were in a convoy. Got there got to England and assigned to my bomb group on June the 12th of 1944. The first mission was very educational, very informing, and very stressful. Our first mission was on June the 21st, and it was to Berlin. And this was shortly after they'd had a buzz bomb or V-1 attack on London the night before. And we had about a 1,200 bomber stream going to Berlin. And it was my first encounter with a German fighter aircraft. We were flying behind the 91st bomb group, and a bunch of fighters came through the 91st. I think there were 6 bombers went down on that particular pass, and they came right back and came through our bomb group, the 398th bomb group. We didn't lose any people on that particular pass, but we lost several a little bit later when we got into the flak area. Matter of fact, our group commander, Major Killen, West Point officer, he was shot down that day and almost took me with him when he went down. We almost had a mid-air collision, and my co-pilot noticed him because I was flying formation. Noticed him, brought him to my attention, and I deviated from my normal course and averted a mid-air collision. Well, I had several missions. We took flak damage and aircraft damage. On July the 6th, which of course was Billy's birthday, my radio operator got hit fairly badly, and he had to be replaced. On August the 6th, which was 1 month later, of course, my tail gunner, he had his left knee shot off by friendly fire, and that was a very memorable occasion, one in which I refused to continue the mission and returned him to home base because as badly as he was injured, he would have died from loss of blood. And I refused to do that. And I reported that to the commander. He approved my decision, and I returned back to Nut Hempstead, which was the home base of the 398th Bomb Group. On several occasions we'd lost an engine, but were able to maintain formation and had flak damage, considerable flak damage, because this airplane is a wonderful airplane as far as its capability of remaining airborne with a tremendous amount of damage. So we were very, very fortunate in that respect. But we had numerous damages, numerous problems, but we survived. During that particular period, everyone, well, we pretty well realized that we weren't going to make it. Only about 1 out of 4 ever made it. And if you got over 10 missions, you were living on borrowed time. And everybody realized that. So you went out and you did the best job you could. Every day you tried to perform and get the mission accomplished with accuracy on the target, because targets were selected because of priority. And if you didn't get it that day, that means you have to go back the next day and get it. So we did our very best. It was difficult. We get up in the morning sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock, depending on the duration of the mission. You get up in the morning and you went and showered and shaved in cold water and went down and had breakfast. And normally it was powdered eggs. And then you go out and get your briefing from the commander and go out and pick up all your survival gear, go to your airplane and talk to your crew chief, your ground crew chief, and know the condition of the aircraft, and load up and you can get into crank engines on time and get in position and take off. And we'd take off about every 15 seconds. We'd be a takeoff. And I was there in June, July, and August of 1944, which would be the best time of the year for any flying. And we had an awful lot of haze and fog early in the morning because we had to go long distances. And I've sat in the seat for several times for 11 hours and never moved out of the seat. And that gets to be a bit trying. And now you do that 3 days in a row, and you just about get used up, even for a young fella. And we had, the bad thing about it was we had 3 crews that lived in a Quonset hut, and that would give you a total of 12 officers. And you didn't make a lot of friends because, you'd be flying on a mission and you'd look out and in the formation, and then the airplane would disappear. You got a direct hit into Bombay, the airplane would disappear, and some fellow that night that you were going to meet at the bar to have a drink in the officers club or go to town for a bite of dinner, he's not there anymore. And so you didn't make a lot of friends. You couldn't. It was a real drag, and you got to be a physical with the three days in a row, and it was emotional as well. But I was never aware of anybody that did not go when they were asked to go or ordered to go. So we knew it had to be done, and we did the best job we could, and thankfully some of us survived. August 13th, 1944 was a Sunday, and we thought we were quite fortunate. It was a short mission, only 7 hours instead of 9, 10, or 11. And the weather was halfway decent, and everything was going well, and it should have been a fairly easy mission, and in most cases it was. We had 36 airplanes, and we were bombing a bridge at a place called Manoir, which is about halfway between Le Havre, which is on the coast, and Paris on the Seine River. And we were doing that because we're trying to prevent the Germans from taking all their heavy equipment back into Germany and fortifying a stronghold. And we were very fortunate. The bridge was destroyed, and it was not repaired for several years. But on that particular mission, I was flying a squadron lead of the low squadron of the high group, and there was one airplane they picked out to shoot down, and they did a good job, and they shot me full of holes. I had number 1 engine was feathered, number 2 engine was on fire, number 3 engine was running away, had the hydraulics shot out, had the communications shot out, had a fire in the tail, and had a fire in the radio room. And I've said several times that at being at 22 years of age, I'm foolish enough to think I could still fly it. I only had about 45 miles to go to the English Channel, hoping to make the channel and being picked up by the British, which had an outstanding air-sea rescue program. However, later I was informed that the left wing was on fire. And I had briefed my people from the very beginning that we can do a lot, but nothing we can do about a wing fire because there's fuel there and it's going to blow. So I gave the word to evacuate, hand signals because we had no radios. And everybody got out of the airplane. We had 9 people on board. 7 of the 9 received Purple Hearts that day. And everybody was fortunate enough to get out. I had put the airplane on autopilot. It was in a gentle left-hand turn. Now my co-pilot, Ben Clark, and I went out through the nose hatch.
Yeah.
He went out first, and his parachute opened immediately. He told me later that he did not open it, but even so it opened. Now I went out, and knowing that they were machine gunning us from the ground, and also rifle fire, I delayed my drop by 20,000 feet. So I dropped about 4 miles free fall till I opened my parachute, and that free fall takes 2 minutes of time. It's a long 2 minutes. I have an awful lot to think about. In the 2 minutes I had to think, I was concerned about my people. And while we were a crew, they were still my responsibility. And we acted as a crew, and it was an outstanding crew. I was concerned about them. I knew some had already been injured by the anti-aircraft before we evacuated, and some of them were injured on the evacuation. But that was my primary concern, is my crew, make sure they get out, because I've seen so many airplanes blow up and the people never had a chance, and that was all I was after. And now the airplane, I put it on autopilot. It was in a left-hand turn, a gentle left-hand turn, made about 2 turns, and each turn was getting closer to my co-pilot, and finally, about the time he was afraid he was going to run into him, then the airplane blew up and fell to the ground in various pieces. The number 3 engine that had been running away fell in a field some miles behind. It had already come apart. The rest of it was scattered over quite an area. Later, I was given pictures of the airplane after it hit the ground, which is very fortunate for me, because I'm sure there are very few people that have had an airplane shot out from under them, and then later in life, they had pictures given to them of what the airplane looked like on the ground. Now, I got those pictures 50 years after this happened, and think about the fact that there were very few cameras there. The Germans had taken almost all of the film, so I do not know where the pictures came from. They just came in the mail one day, which of course I've retained by all means. But I also had another thought. My mother had been worked in a PX in a field artillery base at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. My stepfather was a field artillery officer, and she worked there, and she used to send me large Hershey candy bars, and I put them in a little, what we called a musette bag, which is like a little knapsack or a backpack as they have today, and I hung it from a rafter to keep the rats from getting it. And one of my first thoughts, well, those son of a guns back there are going to get my candy. But that came long after I was thinking about my crew. And they did, but that's another story. Well, I landed in a flax field outside on the outskirts of a little town called Brompton, Bramtot, Brompton. And I landed there at about 1:28 in the afternoon, met by 2 young Frenchmen boys, about 13, 14 years of age, and they directed me in the direction away from the German personnel that was on the ground looking for me. And I ended up in a thicket by a V-1 launch site, bomb site, and stayed there the entire day, knowing I'd have to move at night. The young people had invited me to meet them at a church steeple that evening, which I tried to do, did not locate them. I did run across a man and his wife and a little girl. They knew who I was because they'd people in the area had been looking for me, and of course I didn't know who they were. And at that time, you may be picked up by German sympathizers or Allied sympathizers. So you were taking a big chance on who you confronted. I was very fortunate it happened to be that they were Allied sympathizers. And they took me to the mayor of Brompton, Monsieur Duboc, who was a fine gentleman, put me up in his attic, which was about 10 or 12 foot square. Everything's painted white. The entire room, all the furniture, everything was white. I spent 2 days there. I had given him my escape pictures, which were small pictures we had made in England that are about the size of a photograph on a driver's license. Gave him those, and the next day they made my identification papers, and my name was Ernest Borden, and I lived in a little town of Tricto, which was just south of there between Brompton and Rouen. Rouen being a big port on the Seine River and a large community there. So 2 days later, a gentleman from the neighborhood came up with 2 bicycles, and he and I started pedaling south, heading for the Allied lines.
Can I ask you this? Did you speak French, Hal? How did you communicate with these people?
Oh, it's all sign language. I spoke no French whatsoever. Very few of them spoke any English. A couple of them spoke broken English because they were actually very close to the English Channel and the North Sea, and it was about 40 miles away, really. So some of them had spoke some broken English because I didn't have a chance in the world speaking French. As a matter of fact, a little bit later, I was working on a farm outside of a town of Yvetot, Yvetot, and the gentleman in the evening would take me out in the garden and try to teach me some English, some French phrases, and finally he just gave up and said, "Just play deaf and dumb," and that was about the best I could do. I was pathetic. I tried real hard, had nothing close to the accent, and certainly had I been interrogated, I would have given myself away immediately. But they fronted for me. We encountered a lot of German soldiers on the road. Sometimes we'd stop in a little village and maybe have a cup of tea or something like that, and there'd be German soldiers sitting at the next table, and we just sat there, and I'm scared to death. But the Frenchman, he was calm and cool and collected, realizing, of course, that had I been identified as an American officer, that gentleman would have been shot. So he was taking a big chance. And we left there and we went out to this little town of Yvetot, and I worked on a farm there, harvested hay and harvested wheat for several weeks. Moved out of there because the children were so proud that they had an American pilot there. They were telling everybody else in the neighborhood about me. And of course that's dangerous because now it gets back to the German sympathizers. So they moved me out of there into the town of Yvetot, and I spent a couple of weeks with a gentleman named Raoul, who was the district attorney for that particular area. And he later became, after the war was over, he became a judge in Paris, and he was a judge in the war criminals crimes. So he was very well thought of. He was an amateur radio operator, a ham radio operator, and he was granted a French license number 1. So apparently he had quite a priority. Spent time with him. As a matter of fact, he had a housekeeper, and she was there during the day, and I stayed in a room during the day. It was locked, and then when he came home, she left. Had dinner already on the stove. She left. He'd come up and open the door and get me out, and we'd sit down and chat over dinner, and he'd fix the soup, and then he'd fix the salad, and then he'd fix the entree. We sit there and talked about, because he had been a French fighter pilot in the first part of the war until they capitulated, and then he went back to his civilian business of being an attorney. But I stayed with him for a couple of weeks, and on one occasion we had a German officer come knocking on the door, which I hastened to my room, and he wanted a place to sleep that night. So my host put him up in a room right across from me. Spent the entire night there. The German officer got up the next morning, stole the host's camera, and departed and never said thank you. So that was some of my experiences with the German military. I spent 6 weeks in occupied France. I was rather in a hurry to get out of there because when I left my wife at Kearney, Nebraska, she was pregnant with our first child, and I wanted to get the message to her that I was safe, and I wanted to get out of occupied territory as quickly as possible. I got out in 6 weeks. I was the first officer or first airman of the 398th Bomb Group to escape the continent at that particular time. So I was very fortunate in that way. I ended up further down after I got across the lines, ended up with the British First Army, and then ended up with a ride on a C-47 that had come over to France carrying fighter drop tanks. And the guy said, if you help me unload these drop tanks, I'll take you back to England. And so several of us helped him unload these drop tanks, jumped on his airplane, and flew us back to London. Well, in London, they took us to an interrogation point. A Major White was in charge of it. We briefed him on everything that we had done, everything we had seen. And then they sent me back to my bomb group. I went back there and reported back. And it was quite unique because normally when a crew is shot down, the remaining crew members in the Quonset hut, they go ahead and take out what other clothing of the individuals were shot down that day. They pick out the clothing they want and it's theirs. But when I went back, I went to Unit Supply and asked them if I had anything left. And they said, oh yeah, all your clothes are right here. And I said, well, how did that happen? And they said, well, we understood that you had been shot down and your crew members and were such type of individuals, and so the rest of the people in the Quonset hut said that if anybody's going to get back, Weekley's going to get back, and if I got back, they didn't want to be wearing my clothes. So all my clothes were there, and I spent one day there, and I was shipped back to the United States, to the Pentagon. I rode a train that night to Prestwick, Scotland. Went in a big barracks, double-deck bunks on both sides. I was laying on the bottom bunk about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and the charger quarters came through with a flashlight, looking at the various names on the beds. And I said, "Who are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for Weekley." I said, "You found him. What do you need?" He said, "There's a C-54 down in the ramp waiting to take you back to Washington, D.C." So I jumped on the airplane and he flew me back. See, initially I said I wanted to fly a bomber to England and then come back on a boat. Here I just reversed. I took a boat to England and I flew back. I wanted that period to sort of spool down, to relax, so I wouldn't come home all uptight. But I didn't get that opportunity. And since I had been behind the German lines like about 2 days before that, I had some pretty decent information to give to the commanders in the Pentagon.
What was some of that type of information?
I generated information while I was in IFTO. I met some people that had lived in Le Havre, which was on the coast. Now, we needed coastal towns. We needed docks to bring our supplies and our personnel in. And we'd had a lot of trouble at Cherbourg, and it was pretty well destroyed. And then we had 2 big portable docks and one of those was destroyed in a bad storm. And in Le Havre, I had a good count of the number of military personnel. I even had to count down to how many cows they had in town, so that what they could use as far as sustenance for the people. And I gave that information to the commanders, and we took over Le Havre rather quickly.
Was it part of your training to be that observant in that circumstance, or did you just say, if I get out of this, everybody's going to want to know this?
It wasn't part of the training, no. I just felt that the more information I could get and the more I could help our cause, the better it would be all around. Because I knew that some of my people I'd been with in the combat engineers, they were over there on D-Day, and they were fighting their way through. And I just wanted, anything I could do, if I could make it one day shorter, I was more than happy to do it. I was looking forward to it. So I told them everything I knew. Any tanks that I saw, I told them where the location of the tanks, thinking they may not be there, but you never can tell. So I told them everything I knew, and I spent the time there with the officers in the Pentagon. I had an officer meet me, take me right there. I got there early in the morning, and I was there the whole day, and they pushed me onto a train that night. Well, I wanted to call my wife, but I couldn't call her and let her know that I was safe because of the extreme and heavy traffic they had at that time. And of course, the telephone systems were nothing like we have now. And I tried 2 or 3 times to get a connection, but it was impossible. So they, like I said, they pushed me onto a train because the train was full, and the conductor opened the door and pushed me onto the train and slammed the door shut. And that's the way we went on the Pennsylvania Railroad from Washington, D.C. up to Pittsburgh, and then from Pittsburgh across the Panhandle of West Virginia. When we crossed the Panhandle of West Virginia, there's a railroad bridge that crosses into Ohio. And when I crossed that bridge was my first real feeling that I'd made it home. Everything up to that was all on a graduated base, but when I crossed that bridge into Ohio, I knew I was home. I got in there about 4 o'clock in the morning. I got off the train, went to a payphone, and called my wife, and I said, "Open the door, I'm coming home." And I got a taxi cab and took me up on the hill where she lived with her mother during that particular time. And she had opened the door, and she was standing there, 7 months pregnant, still as beautiful as ever, and I was home. She was a very strong lady. Her reaction was she was so pleased she didn't know what to do. Woke her up wide awake, you know. But of course, in those days, a telephone call in the middle of the night was not always a good thing, and you received some bad information sometimes. But she was very strong, because when she was with her mother, the day she got the telegram from the War Department, normally if you have 4 stars, the person is killed in action. 3 stars, you're missing in action. She's looked at the telegram. She says, "Oh, Mom, he's okay. He's only missing in action. He'll be home fine." And so that's the kind of attitude she had. Of course, she really didn't understand the situation, but because I could have been a prisoner as well, and been there a lot longer. Matter of fact, I could have been there almost another year. But that's the kind of a lady she was. And of course, it was a wonderful homecoming. And then, of course, after I did get home, then I called my mother, who was still working in the PX in Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
And what did your mom say?
Well, mom was always worried. Mom was a worrier. My wife, Billy, was not a worrier. Mom was a worrier. She worried about everything that I did all my life, from the time I put on my first short pants till the time I walked across the street, till the time I got my first motorcycle. And of course, when I started flying airplanes, she was scared to death. But she, like I say, she was a worrier from the very word. But of course, she was thrilled to death that I could make it. And in fact, shortly after that, I had the opportunity in my transfer from various bases, had the opportunity of stopping by and visiting with my mother and stepfather at Fort Sill. December the 7th, nobody knew anything. Everybody was sitting there with their mouth open. When I came back, everybody was hard at work. The men, the women, they had the ration stamps, they rationed sugar, they rationed meat, they rationed tires, they rationed gasoline. The people at home, they were collecting aluminum pots and pans and turning them in so that we could use them to make airplanes out of. And everybody was doing a fantastic job, and everybody was in favor of what we were doing. You go into a bar, you couldn't buy a drink. Everybody was so grateful for what you had contributed, and everybody was involved in it. We had 16 million Americans fighting in World War II, and of course now 12 million of those are going already, and we're losing about 14 to 1,500 a day right now. Oh, I felt that even before D-Day, because we could see it in the skies in Germany. We never did cut their production of aircraft down. They were producing aircraft in massive numbers, even at the end of the war. But the thing about it was, we had eliminated most of their experienced pilots. Now, they had been flying since the Civil War in Spain. They had a lot of on-the-job training. So when they fought in the Battle of Britain, so when our American pilots got there, they had never fired a shot in anger. And these German pilots have been killing people for several years. So it was a change, because now when our pilots started to get experience, then they started shooting down the experienced pilots that they had in Germany, and during the same time we were damaging their oil refineries, and the students that they were training got less and less flying time because they didn't have the oil and the gasoline to support them. So the whole thing changed, and now we had the superiority. And of course, when you take 2,000 bombers on a raid on any given day, and they're covered up with American fighters, people on the ground have got to realize that it can't last very long. We were all thrilled to death, everybody there, because we knew that we had reached a very important goal, but we were also concerned because we knew that we're losing some wonderful people. It had to be a disaster on that beach, and we were all concerned about that. I would have loved to have been able to have flown on that day, but I got there late, and I was not assigned to a group, and so we just enjoyed the thought that we had made one big important step. Now on VE Day, I was instructor in T6s at Gunner Field in Montgomery, Alabama, because they were instructing French students, and I felt that I was obligated. What the French had done for me had really saved my life. I was obligated to help as much as I could, so I volunteered. I had been a B-17 instructor at Lockburn Army Airfield near Columbus, Ohio, and when I knew that they needed help down there, I volunteered to go down and help train the French students. And I was there on VE Day. I remember especially because the commander restricted everybody from flying. There was no flying. And of course, that was probably a very smart move on his part, because I'm sure that some of us young guys would have gotten out there with an airplane and made a fool of ourselves and maybe hurt someone. So that was a very calm day, and nothing I could do there. On VJ Day, I was very fortunate. I was home back in Steubenville with my wife and with my son, and enjoying a peaceful day. VJ Day happened, and then the next day I got a call from the military, said that I had enough points because we gained points due to our activities and how many combat missions we flew, how many years we had in the service, that I had enough points that I could be released from the military. I didn't particularly want to go, but Billy was so happy that I could get out of the military and come back home. And she was so thrilled, and I was so pleased to be with her that I decided to get out, which I did. I did spend a short bit of time in Ohio. She realized it, and I realized it, that I was not happy on the ground. And she said, "You've got to go back." So I went back and started training jet pilots for Korea. For Korea, I trained jet fighter pilots. For Vietnam, I trained jet instructor fighter pilots. And then I developed a gunship called the Shadow, the C-119 gunship, which came after the C-47 gunship and just prior to the C-130 gunship. Now, the 130 is called the Scepter, and we were called the Shadow. With that airplane, we could make one 360-degree turn around a football stadium and put one cannon shell in every square foot. So it was a very rapid-firing equipment that we had. And that was the last thing I did particularly. I also was a operations officer and sometime commander of the 908 Troop Carrier Group that was based at Bates Field in Mobile, Alabama, and later transferred to Brooklyn Air Force Base in Mobile. After 26 years of my association with the military, I retired from that and reported to the Atlanta, Georgia, to the FAA, and was an FAA inspector for 14 years. Started off in general aviation, went to air carrier, specializing in Boeing 727s, DC-9s, and Convaires, and accident investigation, and building airlines. I built airlines, and I retired from that in January of 1982. And on a Friday and the following Wednesday, I was flying a Boeing 720 to Aruba, working for a travel club called the Atlanta Skylarks. Did that for 3.5 years, became a consultant for several years, and then just sort of spooled down, going from the highly active to the active to the less active and down to no active. In the meantime, I was flying the EAA B-17 during that particular period, which I flew this airplane for 23 years. I didn't want to fly B-17s initially. I wanted to fly P-38s. But once I got to the airplane and saw what it did and what it could do and what I could do with it, and I developed an affection for it. I loved the feeling of the power. And I knew we had a job to do, and let's get on with it. And later, as time went on, as I flew the airplane in training and later in combat, I saw what kind of damage the airplane could sustain and stay in the air. Thank God it was made with a slide rule and not a computer, and it wouldn't be flying today, I don't suppose. But they built a fantastic airplane, and no, we had many people come back on 2 engines, come back with no rudder, parts of the wing shot off, holes in the fuselage that you could walk from the radio room right out on the wing, survived mid-air collisions with German fighters, flew the airplane back to, not myself, but other people flew the airplane back to home base, and as they were taxiing in, the airplane broke in two. So the idea that this airplane could take that much punishment and still provide protection to the crew you develop a certain admiration, a certain love for it. And after coming back to the States and flying on tour like I have for many years, it meant a lot to me in the fact that in some way I was representing some of my friends and some of the people that flew the bomber that I did not know, of course, and just bring it around and show it to people. Some people hadn't seen the airplane for 50 or 55 years, and they some of them came out of the airplane with smiles on their face, and some old guys like me would come out of the airplane with tears running down their cheeks of the memories that they had and the friends and the people that they had lost. And it has been a wonderful experience for me, because brought it all back around to so many people that were so involved with the airplane. Because remember, in a fighter, this is all great, but there's one pilot and several mechanics on the ground supporting it. But in a bomber, you had 10 people, and you had 4 officers and 6 enlisted personnel, and they came from all over the United States. And so everybody knows somebody or had a relative that flew in a bomber, whether it was a B-29, a B-24, a B-17, or a B-25, B-26s. They had multiple personnel, and we were distributed all over the United States. And to go back into those areas and show the airplane as well kept and as beautiful as this airplane is, show it to these people again, they were thrilled, and I was thrilled for them. My experience was with training cadets from the Naval Academy, or officers from the Naval Academy, officers from the Military Academy at West Point. I was involved in the first personnel and the first people, and started with the Air Force Academy when it was in Denver till it moved to Colorado Springs. And so, no, the military would be a high point, but not World War II in itself. I gained an awful lot of experience in World War II. I'm grateful for the people that I worked with on my crew. I'm grateful for the people in France that protected me and aided me. But I'm just grateful for everything and everybody, because when you're 84 years old, you're grateful for most everything. But the feeling of comradeship, the feeling of unity, the feeling of this is my country and I'm proud to be a part of it, I just don't feel it. And as I mentioned yesterday, every time I have a talk with anybody, the last thing I say is, God bless America.
Well, I was born and raised in Blue Island, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. Went to, grade school, high school there, and had a pretty normal childhood, I guess. I think I was happy I was a kid then than being a kid now, because I think life was a little more uncomplicated. When I graduated from high school, I was only 16 years old. I had started when I was 5, and I skipped 3rd grade. Well, I thought, I really can't go out and get a job. I mean, and a bunch of my school chums had said, well, why don't we join the National Guard? And there's a National Guard unit, 124th Field Artillery, on the south side of Chicago, and we'll join the Guard, and then we know what we'll be in. They're not just going to put us in the infantry or whatever. We figured we're just going to have to serve a year, and then we'd get out and have our year done. Well, that was all fine and dandy, except Pearl Harbor came along.
Well, my Uncle Jack and I have talked about some of his World War II experiences from time to time over the years, and I finally, I always thought that he was on a B-29, and he'd always correct me. Finally, I got it right that he was on a B-17 in World War II. And I was talking to some of my pals, Gary Weaver.
Gary Sinise, a venerable actor and director, has been a friend of the DAV since 1994. His performance in the movie Forrest Gump, his character as Lieutenant Dan Taylor, everyone who saw that film reacted in a way that we reacted, saying, my goodness, what a wonderful portrayal, what an honest portrayal of a severely injured, a catastrophically injured veteran who served his country. And I started talking to Gary over breakfast about our air show program, hoping to entice him perhaps to come to one of the shows and see what goes on, get him interested in the program. He said, Gary, you got a B-25, that's wonderful, but you know anyone who has a B-17 or access to a B-17? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. Believe it or not, he looked at me and wondered if I was just kidding with him. And then he went on to say, my uncle Jack, was a navigator on a B-17 during the war. And he flew 30 missions, survived those 30 missions, obviously. You think it would ever be possible that I could get him a ride on a B-17?
So I told my dad what I was planning to do. Once I knew that Gary could make it happen, we could figure out a date and everything, then I told my dad, I said, Dad, here's what I'm trying to work out for Uncle Jack. And my mom and dad, were shocked and, blown away by that. And I said, but we got to keep it a secret. As I said to Uncle Jack, I said, okay, June 23rd, you're going to Texas. And he just looked at me, and I had told my mom and dad, and he just looked at me, and he goes, oh, well, I'll have to see if I can figure that out and find, I might have something going on. I said, no, you don't have anything going on. You're going to Texas on June 23rd for the weekend, or June 24th. And so I told him that my band was going to play down here, and, I wanted him to come and experience the concert. And, well, we fooled him as long as we could.
The whole world benefited from this extraordinary generation of Uncle Jacks. Their life arc includes overcoming the Great Depression, fighting and winning the biggest, deadliest war in human history, and creating an age of economic prosperity and technological advancement which may never be equaled. Yet, they rarely talk about any of it. To me, he's always been just my Uncle Jack. It wasn't until I became active in veterans' causes that I really started thinking about what he'd done. what he'd been through.
And I think my first mission was into France. And it's like being at a movie. I mean, you're so new to all this, and you know, plane takes off, and you get in your group, and next thing you know, you're going over the English coast, and now you're going over the French coast, and you see a little flag over here, and I'd say for about the first 5 missions, it's just like, well, boy, isn't this something? Nothing's happened to you yet, and you do see some planes get shot down, but it doesn't sink in yet. Well, anyway, we went to Leipzig. Now, it always kind of amazed me every time I saw this. As far as you could see in front of you, there were airplanes. As far as you could see back of you, there were airplanes. So we're on the bomb run, and we get hit. The one engine goes out, and with that, we lose a little power, and I'm in the lead ship, and we start to go down a little bit. Well, then the group follows us. So we go to the secondary. They're still following us. And we're trying to maintain altitude, but we just barely got to this airfield, and we dropped our bombs. But now we lost another engine. And about that time, the gas starts streaming out from under the wing. Just a big stream. Well, we knew we were in trouble then. Well, so the group, they just keep on flying. They're going back. We're all by ourselves. And we said, well, we'll just keep going. And we'll go back as far as we can. If we have to bail out, or if the plane catches on fire, well, then we'll bail out. So we just kept going and going. We kept going down, down, just slowly. Now we only got about 2.5 engines because the other ones weren't working. And we just kept going and going. And pretty soon we pick up some fighters, a couple of P-38s that looked very nice sitting out here like that. Then we picked up some P-47s, and they, pick us up along the way. So that was kind of nice because we're all by ourselves. So we finally get to the coast, but this time we're down about 700 feet. And we didn't know whether we're going to have to ditch or what. So we knew, and we're practically out of gas. So we did land in England at a RAF base. We did get that. We got back that far, and so they came and got us then. But the plane was pretty well shot up.
We told Uncle Jack that we were recording his remembrances for an oral history project. At this point, he was still not aware of the surprise that awaited him.
Okay. You guys wouldn't tell me what this is all about. Well, look what we have right here.
You were a navigator, correct?
Right.
Well, we're getting ready to go fly, and our navigator called in sick today, so would you do us the honor of going flying with us today?
You're going to actually go flying?
If you'll go.
Well, sure I'll go.
Well, Gary, would you like to go along?
I'll go. You want to go on a ride?
Sure I do.
I wanted to be right with Uncle Jack to sort of experience, you know, his first time in the plane and be there when we took off. And just watching his face was pretty awesome. You know, it made me think, you know, what must it be like for him to be actually taken off in this plane again?
But I'd say, well, here we go. And then that was the first time. Then after that, it was here we go again. And yesterday, it seemed like we took off. In my mind, I was saying, here we go again. Let me tell you about going back home. After your missions, you got orders to go back to the States, and came in to New York Harbor. And I will have to say, when you see Statue of Liberty as you're going by it, and that was just something else. I mean, you just can't believe that now you're home, at least up to that point. But that was a sight that you never forget. Just in a sense, it was kind of overwhelming. I mean, I had no idea that I would ever do anything like that again. And when we opened the door, and then I'm actually standing there, it was kind of a wow. I did see a B-17, but I was just, surprised. There it sat, and it was a surprise. I will say.
After doing his duty and surviving the war, like millions of other veterans, Jack settled back into life in his hometown. He went to college and earned a degree from Northwestern University. He married a hometown girl and raised 4 children. They remained married for 50 years until her recent passing. He went to work for the hometown bank and remained there for 32 years.
I like what you're doing, is to preserve this, because it's true. Otherwise, it's just like some of the things I'm going to show you. They get put in the trunk and forgotten.
Not if we can help it, Uncle Jack. Not if we can help it.
You cannot place statues or build memorials in thin air. These airplanes, rescued, restored, returned to the sky, are the memorials. Through them, we give enduring thanks to those who gave everything they had to defend everything that we hold dear. By sharing them, we remind each other of the sacrifice. By sharing them, we introduce our heirs to their heritage. One week each summer, these national treasures are flown here. Twice each day, those who restored them present them to those who risked their lives to fight in them. And those who really did it tell the rest of us how it really was. It is a singular series of history lessons that anyone who cherishes liberty ought to see.
Gary Sinise is known to most of us as Lieutenant Dan, the character he played in the Oscar-winning movie Forrest Gump, and as Mac Taylor, the lead character in the long-running TV series CSI New York. He is equally well known for his tireless support of our troops, veterans, and first responders. The tradition of service to our country runs long and deep in Gary's family. His uncle, Jack Sinise, flew 30 missions as a lead navigator in World War II. Gary's brother-in-law and close friend, Jack Treese, served 23 years in the U.S. Army, earning 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts. Jack served in Vietnam as a combat medic with the 101st Airborne Division. Sadly, both Jack Sinise and Jack Treese passed away this past October. General Patrick Brady knows firsthand the heroism of combat medics like Jack Treese. During 2 tours of duty as a medevac pilot in Vietnam, he flew more than 2,000 missions and rescued more than 5,000 wounded. For evacuating 51 wounded while having 3 helicopters shot out from under him on January 6, 1968, he was presented the Medal of Honor. In one of the most inspirational of all Warbirds in Review forums, General Brady and Gary Sinise will pay tribute to Jack Sinise, Jack Treese, and indeed all those veterans who risked all to defend us and to save their brothers and sisters in the field while the battle still raged. Providing a fitting backdrop for this presentation will be the Yankee Air Force's beautifully restored Yankee Lady, a B-17 much like the one in which Jack Sinise flew his 30 wartime missions.
Thank you. It is such a privilege to be here to share with all of you in honoring our veterans who have protected our freedoms for decades, our active duty personnel, and our civilians who restore these airplanes because they're committed to maintaining this history. We don't want any of us to be forgotten. So it's a privilege to be with you today. Thanks for joining us. Gary Sinise, an Emmy, a Golden Globe nomination for an Oscar, are just a few of his many professional honors. Of course, his Lieutenant Dan band continues to make us tap our feet and get up and dance in the aisles. Gary, with his long commitment to honoring veterans, created his foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation. His foundation serves our nation. It honors our defenders, our veterans, our first responders, their families, in fact, anybody in need. He is national spokesperson for the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial and the recipient of the Presidential Citizen Medal for his humanitarian work supporting Iraqi children. Welcome, Gary Sinise.
Thank you, bud.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now welcome Medal of Honor recipient, General Patrick Brady. Gary, tell us about Jack Treese, your brother-in-law. How close were you to him?
Well, Jack was more like a brother to me. I met Jack back in the early 80s through my wife. He married my wife's sister. They met at Fort Stewart when they were both at Fort Stewart. Jack, as they said in this video, is a combat medic in Vietnam, and he stayed in the service for 22 years. He met my wife's sister down at Fort Stewart. And we became very, very close, very good friends. I ended up, when I started taking USO tours and going overseas and visiting our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, I would take Jack with me because obviously he was somebody who would really appreciate getting to see our service members in the current conflict. And I knew he would enjoy being there, and it would be something that I could give back to him. So we were very, very close. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer in April of last year, and he died in October. It went very, very quickly. But I learned a lot from him about service and the Army, Vietnam, and a little bit about what it was like for him to be in service as a combat medic, although I'm probably going to learn a lot more today from General Brady, because my brother-in-law, he didn't talk a whole lot about it, but I knew there was a lot going on in him, and I miss him very much.
General Brady, talk about your crew. When you got a call to go out to evacuate people, who's the crew? Well, how's it made up?
The crew on a dust-off helicopter was 4 people: pilot, co-pilot, medic, and a crew chief. And it was a very, very tight-knit team. We had to work together in all kinds of terrain and everything. I feel like I know Jack too. He was in Vietnam the same time I was. We were there. Of course, you all remember Bob Hope and what he did for the troops when he came to Vietnam. I can't tell you what that meant to me and to the troops that I served with. And this next to me, Gary Sinise, is the Bob Hope of today. And what he does for those troops is just wonderful. Now, Jack was a medic. He was a combat medic. And the combat medic on our aircraft saw more traumatic amputations, sucking chest wounds, belly wounds, probably than a lot of physicians. And they were very good in a very rough environment of saving those lives. I'll just tell you a vignette or two about a couple of the guys who did the same kinds of things. By the way, Jack died on my birthday last year, the 1st of October, and he was in the same battalion that I would later command in the 101st 326 Med Battalion when they were in Vietnam, so I do feel close to this kid. I had a medic, his name was Steve Hook. To give you an idea of a typical thing that a medic does in combat, we were called into an area. It was supposed to be secure. You got some veterans Vietnam guys here? You know what a secure area was? They would say, dust off, come on in, it's secure. And so we get in there and hit the ground, and 2 people popped out of spider nest right beside the aircraft, shot my crew chief, shot my medic, Steve Hook. The crew chief was hanging in his harness. I thought he was dead. Hook, the medic, disappeared. And the guys on the ground went to work killing the snipers. They were right there next to us. And I'm looking for Hook. And they said, get the hell out of here. So there was a kind of a little keyhole, so I pushed the aircraft forward into the keyhole, and there were 11 wounded. And I look around, and there's Hook, my medic, who's shot, dragging the wounded to the aircraft. A lot of the friendlies wouldn't stand up to help him, and he's dragging 11 people onto the aircraft. He gets on, we're heavily loaded, and I look around trying to get it out of that area. I look around and Hook is going through the bodies in the back of the helicopter treating, but he's bleeding. He's shot in the back and he's bleeding, and I'm afraid he's going to bleed out. So I grab one of the wounded. I'm trying to fly the aircraft with one hand. My co-pilot was having some problems, and shake one of the wounded guys and point to his first aid packet and say, and then point to the hole in Hook's back and say, plug it up. And so he's plugging up Hook while Hook is taking care of the patients. Now that's one example of what his brother-in-law went through on a daily basis in Vietnam. And I can tell you many stories about, these were my favorite human beings. The crew chief and the medic in Vietnam, who was part of the team that we had that saved literally 1 million souls just in Vietnam alone. So he was a great, I feel like I know him. I know he was a great person. I would have loved to met him in person.
You were obviously honored, when President Nixon bestowed the medal on you. What does that mean to you, reflecting on what you're describing right now?
Well, I was actually embarrassed when you stand up there, there's people on the White House lawn, and you know very well that guys like Jack and guys like Hook and Pappy Coleman and the guys that flew with me, you know very, very well that they did everything that you did. and nobody saw it. And it's just that simple. The greatest thing about that award is that a bunch of your buddies saw it, appreciated it, and took the time to put you in for it. And so that, you know, you wear that for them. That's, you know, that sounds trite, but it's absolutely true. Guy says, I'm doing my duty. All I'm doing is, that's absolutely true. Except on some occasions, somebody will see what you've done and will appreciate it and will take the time to write it up. And that's how I got the Medal of Honor.
Describe, once you go in once, and you see what's on the ground, whether it's mines and it's explosions and getting shot at, and they have to crawl out of, the medics have to crawl out of the helicopter and do what you describe. Well, fine, maybe the first time, but when the bell rings the next time, what does it take to do it 6, 8, 10 times a day, day after day, week after week?
Yeah, that's a trick. Guys will oftentimes be very, very gung-ho the first time in, and then the next time after they see what they've seen, you might have some problems. But we never had that problem with our medics and with our crew chiefs on the helicopters. These guys were saving lives, and you know, they would say, okay, we went in, the aircraft went in, he got shot up, left, and then dust-off went in after the other aircraft got shot up and got the patients out. Big deal. Well, guess what? The second mouse gets the cheese. And it's just that simple. The guys that would be shooting, by the time we got there, it was not that bad. We were able to go in using different flying techniques and be pretty secure about what we did. But the key to the kind of people that we had there's no experience in the world that can match the experience of saving another human being's life. Nothing like it. I had an experience when I was a young kid, swimming and another thing, and geez, I just felt so good about it. In Vietnam, we did that day in and day out, saving lives. And so these guys, like Jack, Treese, and the Hook, and Coleman, and these guys, they were up every morning eager to go out and to rescue those people, to overcome the obstacles, to get around the enemy, to get in that terrain or the weather or whatever the problem was, and to get that guy out and get him into a hospital where the physician saved his life. That was the fact.
Where does the word fear come into any of this conversation?
Oh, God. Fear is a horrible thing, but what you have to do is, fear will cause to happen that which caused it. Just think about that. You didn't want to my faith was a substitute for fear. I'm a Catholic. I was never afraid in combat. The system that I used to get the Medal of Honor was a system the good Lord showed me flying in 00 weather in day, and the system I used to get the Distinguished Service Cross was a system that the good Lord showed me at night flying in weather as well. Fear is an emotion. Courage is a decision. Big difference between a guy who reacts under the emotion of fear when his life is on the line and the lives of the people around him are on the line. He is in a reaction mode. The guys like Jack Treese and Steve and the guys that flew with me, that was a decision. They knew what they were going into. That is real courage when they will do that day in and day out.
When you came back, you know, after your second tour, and Jack, you know, came back obviously around the same time, how were you received when you got back?
Well, you know, the good thing about what happened to us in Vietnam is that America was kind of ashamed of the way they treated us, and they're treating the guy today so much better. And you got guys like Gary going to take care of these kids. You got so many people who care about it. Now, having said that, the VA is not doing a very good job taking care of these guys. And you guys, and I'm going to tell the group, this, you need to get off your ass and get out and find people and elect people who are going to take care of this guy when he comes home. And that ain't enough. You got to take care of your buddy who's a veteran. And I told David and anybody who would listen to me, my daughter was in the invasion of Iraq. She was a second lieutenant. She was a medic just like I was. I've been almost dead a bunch of times, but I never went through what I went through when my little baby girl is in that invasion. I'm hearing through the media that they're being overrun, they're out of ammo, ambushed, all that bullshit, until I could finally get to a television station that told me the truth. But I never went through anything like I went through. And so that, to me, said, my God, my wife, the families of all the veterans who were over there, just think what they went through. We didn't think about it when we were over there. The guys never thought about it. We never worried about it. But when I saw my little girl go, that brought home to me. So the other thing besides taking care of your buddies is taking care of those families as well. They sacrificed their youth so that liberty might grow old. And they've got widows and they've got people that need our help. And as I said, we've been honored to death, for God's sakes. We need to take care of those like us who need our help and their families.
You know, when so many of you came back and the media was on this, of course, like a hawk during the Vietnam War, and calling the returning soldiers and airmen baby killers, what could you possibly say back to that if you heard that?
Well, here's the way I looked at it. I didn't believe that was the American people speaking. I believe that was the media. And you don't want to get me started on the media. But I do believe, yeah, they're supposed to tell us the truth about ourselves. They don't do that. They're so essential to our freedom, and they just don't really do their job. But I felt like what went on when we came back from Vietnam was a product of the media. We didn't, today the kids that go out and they're welcomed and idolized. We kind of went underground. We went back to our jobs. I stayed in the military, and although I hated it when I went in, I didn't want nothing to do with it, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I think the American people appreciate the Vietnam veteran, and I know today, because of the way they treated us, I feel this sincerely, that they are treating this guy in a way that they will never be confused with the way they treated us in Vietnam.
Yeah. Gary, as you listen to this, I'm thinking you've put your money where your mouth is. General Brady just said to all of us, we've got a job to do to become part of solutions, not continuing to be part of the problem through not doing anything. You're doing it with your foundation. Tell me about the foundation, how you formed it, and what you're doing with it.
Well, it's an honor to be here with my friend General Brady here. I am very much motivated by what you just said, Pat, which is the Vietnam veterans in my family are the ones that really opened my eyes back as a young man. Now, I have veterans on my side of the family. My Uncle Jack, World War II, and my Uncle Jerry was on a ship in the Pacific in World War II. My dad was in the Navy. My grandfather was he was an ambulance driver in France in World War I. But on my wife's side of the family, it was the Vietnam veterans who were just a little bit older than I when I graduated from high school, and who I met because of my wife, who really opened my eyes and educated me quite a bit to what guys just a little bit older than I were going through when I was kind of diddly-bopping around and playing guitar and chasing girls and things like that in high school. So when that happened, when I got this education from meeting her brothers and Jack Treese, her sister's husband, a lot changed for me. And so I became very involved early on in the late 70s and 80s. Whoa!
Just 22, probably.
Wow.
Sound of freedom.
That's it.
So in the late 70s and early 80s, I just got a real awakening there. Sound of Freedom is still going on, isn't it? And that's great. And I got very involved with locally in the Chicago area with local Vietnam veterans groups. and worked with them from early 80s up until the mid 90s, and then I played a Vietnam veteran in Forrest Gump. So I felt very prepared, just very motivated when I got that part to honor our Vietnam veterans and to do right by them by playing that particular character. And then through that I got involved with the disabled American veterans because I played an injured veteran. And I was introduced to the DAV, and that's a big reason why I'm here today. They sponsor these concerts that I do, and I've been involved with them since 1994. And then after September 11th, when we deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, it felt that there was a purpose for me beyond staying home. And so I volunteered for the USO and got very involved with that, and a lot of different military charities that were popping up in reaction to the attacks on September 11th. And then that manifested itself into my own foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, whose whole purpose is to serve and honor the needs of our military men and women, our first responders, those who protect and defend and provide our security and freedom for us, and those in need. And that's what the Gary Sinise Foundation is trying to do all around the country.
So on a day-to-day basis, where do these commitments take you and the people who work with you? I mean, physically, where do you go?
I'm constantly traveling. Today I'm doing this veteran support concert here. Last week I was somewhere, and the week before I was somewhere else. So we're doing quite a bit. You can learn about the foundation at GarySiniseFoundation.org. But one of the great things that has happened through the course of this post-9/11 reaction and response is that I was connected with our Medal of Honor recipients in the Medal of Honor Foundation, and I'm on the President's Advisory Group for the Medal of Honor Foundation, and I have since become a national spokesperson for the Medal of Honor Museum that we're going to build in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. So I want to encourage everybody to go to medalofhonormuseum.org. It's the Medal of Honor Museum website. It'll completely key you in to what we're going. I think General Brady would probably want to talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. General, tell us about it, and why it's important.
You know, they say that every so-called hero must at last become a bore. So all of those of us who are in the Medal of Honor Society, in order to keep from becoming bores, have decided to do something. In the old days when we had conventions, you would go there and we would party. And when you party with guys like Pappy Boynton, Commando Kelly, Scooter Burke, these are world-class partiers. And we decided that, and Chief Childress, my God, I partied with him one night and I don't remember it. But we went to Philadelphia one time. And the mayor there, Mayor Rendell, says, would you guys in the Medal of Honor Society, we have a convention in some city around the United States every year. Would you go on a drug walk with us? Well, we didn't know what a drug walk was, but we walked through these urban or suburban or whatever, these neighborhoods, these downtrodden neighborhoods at night to show the drug dealers, I guess, that the mayor was there and that the Medal of Honor recipients were with him. And so the next day they said, well, why don't you go to a school? So we did. We went to a high school in Philadelphia and we had to go through metal detectors. And we thought, good Lord, you know, we have got to leave something behind besides a hangover. When we leave from now on and go to a place, we're going to do something else. So we developed our character development program. Gary's been instrumental on that. He's in our board. This is probably the finest, the most powerful board in the world. The people who are on that board are world-class American citizens who have created thousands and thousands of jobs and done great things for this country. And so through our character development program, we go into the schools across America and we teach children the importance of courage, source of success, sacrifice, a source of happiness, what a hero is, have to be a good person to be a hero, and what America's nobility is and patriotism. We use Medal of Honor vignettes to bring out these different points, and they're online, they're free, and you can get to them anytime you want. But the ultimate the ultimate end of all this, we're going to die. We're the average age of the Medal of Honor guy is 75 or something. We're going to be dead in 5 or 6 years, almost all of us. There was 400 of them when I came in. Now there's about 79 of us left. We've got some young guys, but not enough. So this museum is going to be a vault for our values. This museum is different than any other museum in America. It's not about a war. It's not about an army service. It's not about infantry armor. It's about all those things as represented by Medal of Honor recipients and the values that that medal represents. This medal, the other half token of this medal is courage, sacrifice, patriotism. That's going to be in that museum. And so that when a young man walks in the front of that museum and sees that Medal of Honor recipients, not only what they did in combat, but one of them's on Mount Rushmore. One of them was the first guy to fly with a gyro that opened up the airways for all the rest of us. This guy wrote taps. They did other things. And young people can do those same things in their life. They can be heroes in their life. And this is what we want them to take away. You go through this museum, one person, you come out the other end, a different person. Every one of us in our lifetime has met someone, somewhere, who made a difference in our life and made us what we are today. For me, it was the Christian Brothers of Ireland who just beat the shit out of me. And they finally straightened me out. But somewhere, somehow, somebody is going to make, and we hope that we, through our museum and through, we couldn't do it without guys like Gary. And that's the end. That's my bucket list. And if I die at the dedication of the museum, I'll be happy.
There are now a number of there are now a number of young Medal of Honor recipients from Iraq and Afghanistan. What is their effect when you go around the country and appear publicly with these young men? What's the effect of them compared to, say, you?
Yeah, the young people don't want to hear a lot from me. I'm too much like their parents and grandparents. But the young kids that are coming into society now, and I think there's only 5 or 6, I haven't met them all, but the ones I've been with are real high-quality kids. And they are so important because a young person can communicate with them. I don't understand what's going on with these young people today, hardly, but they do. And so they can communicate with them. They know the technology. They understand what's going on in their minds and hearts and all that. So these young people are going to be jewels for the future of our character development program and our museum. And so we're breaking them in. We're breaking them in, and we're hoping that they follow in our footsteps.
Gary, when you listen to Pat talk about Jack Treese, your brother-in-law, and what he did, and you hear the details, how much of those details had you ever heard from Jack?
Well, just very few, actually. You know, I would try to get him to talk about it, and he would always be very sort of matter-of-fact about it, you know. And then, you know, but I've read about some of the things that he's done. And I know that he did a lot more than he was willing to kind of share. But he has, you know, he and his wife, my wife's sister, had a son. His name's Gavin Treese. He's serving in the Army. He's done 2 tours in Afghanistan. And he's carrying on the tradition in the family as somebody who's serving in this current conflict. Jack was very proud of his son, I know. He was a quiet man, very reserved, and I wish I'd recorded him. We have a wonderful program at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans that my foundation is helping to sponsor because we're losing so many of those veterans. And we're sponsoring a historian to go out around the country and record oral histories of our World War II veterans. And, you know, I'm doing that quite a bit, as we did with my Uncle Jack, and I just wished that I'd sat down with my brother-in-law and talked to him more and gotten him to speak about it more.
You talk about carrying on the family tradition. There was your Uncle Jack. flying B-17s, the navigator. How much did he talk? How much did he share?
Well, he wouldn't be quiet. I could. No, Uncle Jack, you know, I never, as a young man, it was really the Vietnam veteran side of my family that got me to kind of start thinking a lot about our veterans, because by the time I was old enough, my Uncle Jack, my Uncle Jerry, my dad, my grandfather, they were all well beyond their service years, and so they didn't talk about it all that much. But after I started getting involved a lot with military charities and USO and all of that, I just grabbed my Uncle Jack and made him go different places with me, like this trip to take a ride on the B-17.
Yeah, how'd you pull that off? How'd you surprise him?
I just told him I was going to play a concert in Texas and I wanted him to come, and he said, "Oh, okay, I'll come." And then we really shocked him with it was all about getting him down there so we could give him a ride on the B-17. And that happened all through my contacts and friends at the DAV, Disabled American Veterans, who did that for my Uncle Jack, and John Tennyson, who made this lovely film about him. And then just many, many times after that, I would take Uncle Jack, like I brought him here to Oshkosh. I took him to D.C. quite a bit, to the National Memorial Day concert that I'm the co-host of every year. He got to come to that concert quite a bit. I would take him to the Medal of Honor events that we did at the Reagan Library out in Simi Valley. And he would just participate in a lot of things. And he looked so forward to traveling quite a bit. He traveled all the way up till he was 89 years old. The last trip he made was to Disney World, where I narrate a show down there, and all he wanted, and we got him there on his birthday, which was November 27th, and all he wanted was a picture of Mickey and Minnie with him. That's what he wanted for his birthday. And I had a friend of mine who worked there, so I said, "Can you get me a picture with Mickey and Minnie?" And he said, "Okay, show up here at 2:30. So we went and showed up at 2:30 at this little place. We went backstage, and the entire cast, 90 people from the parade, were all dressed up in their costumes and everything, and with a big sign, "Happy 90th birthday, Uncle Jack." And we went in there and gave him a great time. And he had his picture not only with Mickey and Minnie, but with the entire cast. And he died the following year. So he had 89 great years and a lot of fun on his last trip.
Pat, we're talking about many veterans being unable to talk about their experiences. How useful is it to get all these messages out for veterans to try to talk more about their experiences, to make more people aware?
You know, first of all, you guys all know I'm a helicopter pilot, right? In honor of Jack Sinise, I wore a fixed wing. The fixed wing weenies don't fly. We know that. They ride. You only really fly a helicopter. Both arms, both legs. So in honor of him, I wore this thing. And but my dad was a veteran. He was with Darby's Rangers in World War II. And here's my take on it. I think that, and we started a program up in Washington State at a veterans hospital there, where we call it a partners program. And we would bring young people in from the schools, and the veterans are in the beds there, and the kids would go into the room and talk to the veterans about their experiences. I wish that I had talked to my father about Darby's Rangers, North Africa, Sicily, Italy, but frankly, I didn't want anything to do with the military or nothing about it. And so, you know, it's like the guy said, we amputate our memories, we don't talk to each other about ourselves or our past. We need to do that. And my experience has been that these veterans are happy to share their experiences if somebody will just ask them. Just go up to your grandfather or your father and say, "Hey, Dad, what was it like there in North Africa? Did you go up against Rommel? How about Sicily? How about Italy?" And so the stories that I heard him tell were just jokes, you know, just robbing a bank so he could buy some oranges or something in Italy. But they are happy, and I believe that. There's nothing anybody does that there's nothing to be ashamed about. Nothing. Everybody has a problem with fear. But there's nothing that they should ever be ashamed of or afraid to talk about. Now, they see some horrible things, you know, that you just can't get around that. But you don't have to talk about that. Talk to them about the history of it. Talk to them about the lessons it taught them, the brotherhood that goes on between them and their buddies. There's no closer relationship. I'm sorry, Nancy. That's my wife. She's back there. But there's no closer relationship, really, than what goes on between men in combat. You never... I can see a guy that we took us 38 years to find Pappy Coleman, just died recently. I walked up to him, it's like yesterday. The guy that I told you about, Hook, the shot in the back and the guy put the pad in it, he was seriously hurt another time, and almost by a miracle that I can't explain to this day, I found him, got him out. We see each other at least once a year, and if we hadn't seen each other in 10 years, it wouldn't make any difference. It's the same feeling. And one of the greatest honors of my life, really, was Pappy Coleman. This kid was shot 3 times, three Purple Hearts, 3 Silver Stars. He was with me on the Medal of Honor action. One time he was shot right through the lips. They jumped on him and said, Pappy, Pappy. He says, not to worry, I just kissed the bullet that had my name on it. Jumped up, back to get the patients, in the minefield with me. His pants were on fire. He was almost blown through my rotor blades. Back to get the patients. And I use him as an example of a good person. He left the Army with 18 years. 18 years. He could have been Sergeant Major of the Army to go home and take care of his family. He's a hero, not because of 3 Silver Stars. He's a hero because he's a good person. And that's what's important about heroism. But anyhow, the great thrill was when he called me on his deathbed. And here I am, I'm watching my beloved Spurs kick Miami's ass. And all of a sudden I get a phone call from him. He's on his deathbed and he wants me to handle his funeral. He's now in the Aviation Hall of Fame. He's in the Dust-Off Hall of Fame. Marvelous human being. The only problem with it was they were burying him in Turkey Creek, Kentucky. They don't speak English in Turkey Creek, Kentucky. And to communicate with soldiers and to communicate with funeral people and to get bands and crap drove me nuts. But I was happy to do it for Pappy, I guarantee you. So talk to them. Don't be afraid to talk to them. They're happy to tell you their experiences. Keep away from the bad stuff, you know. I'm a guy that can't stand a needle, for God's sakes. I didn't think I would get through my first mission, but they did, I did, and they're more than happy to share the experiences with you folks. Just ask them.
Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you are veterans? Yeah. When this program's over, all of you veterans, we have a young woman who will have challenge coins for all of you who are veterans. Also, Gary has to leave immediately to go do sound check for his band performance for tonight. And we're going to take a picture with all the volunteers, by the way, who want pictures with the... Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Gary Sinise and General Patrick Brady.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the Dronescapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.